Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Thanks for
everybody.
joining me and that guy down below me sitting on his
This me.
porch is the Rick Wilson.
Hey,
Um,
everybody.
Happy Friday afternoon. Um,
Likewise.
I posted, last week I wrote a piece uh, about called the Pink Mafia, about the sort of hidden power structure of closeted gay Republicans, which is something that Rick and I ran into
A
very
lot.
early on in our careers.
Uh, Stuart, I was thinking about that. The second part of the story is just, this is a great history of a part of the Republican Party that it's so. I almost feel terrible for all these guys because they grew up. That was the period of time, y'all, where you couldn't get a security clearance if you were gay or openly gay. You couldn't be, you know, uh, it was really hard for anybody to be out at that in that era. And man, I think it really fucked some of these people up. I mean, and it's just
Yeah,
it's tragic.
it must have been horrible to
Hmm.
be in that world in which you knew sort of a key essence of who you are was not acceptable.
Correct. Correct.
Um, and in this, so I wrote the first piece last week, and I wrote a follow up that came out yesterday evening. They focused a lot on a guy named Bob Bauman.
Oh,
Um, Bob Bauman was a little sort of pocket square of a guy. Always wore three-piece
right.
suits,
Very dapper.
very dapper.
Very dapper.
He had worked on the Hill, like my old boss John Henson. They both come up on the Hill, both been pages.
Hmm.
He got himself elected to Congress from the first congressional district of Maryland, which is mainly the Eastern Shore, little
Sure.
suburbs
Yep.
of Baltimore. And he set about to be the self-defined watchdog of the House. Now, you have to realize at this time it had been Democratic majority in the House since 1955.
Hmm.
So Republicans really had no power. And Bauman would go to the floor of the House, and I described this taking from a New York Times article about it at the time. Uh, stand by the floor of the House by a microphone and would basically do anything he could to annoy Democrats and slow the process down. And
Take a
it
lesson,
was,
Democrats.
in a way, it was, Democrats hated him for it, of course.
Sure.
I think a lot of Republicans really didn't like him for it because it was like a pain in the ass. And he was constantly demanding roll calls.
Hmm.
Um, and he was in Congress for a couple of terms. And then he was arrested in a gay bar called the Chesapeake, uh, soliciting a 16-year-old male prostitute, it was so described. And that was in October before his reelection, October 3rd before his reelection, uh, a few weeks later, or for his reelection campaign a few weeks later. Um, and I talk about how John Henson, who had been my former boss, who had come out
Yep.
that summer with that, asked me to meet with Bob. And Rick, did you ever? You probably didn't ever.
I don't think I ever ran into Bob. I don't think I ever knew Bob.
Well, he was not just a congressman. He was founder of like one of these groups, some young American Conservative Union or
Yeah,
something.
it was one of those. It was one of those things that essentially is now what CPAC is in a way,
Yes.
or Turning Point is more probably a better analogy.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, God knows there's a through line of young conservative activist groups being founded and staffed by the gay guys that they are on their publicly facing side, especially in the 80s and 90s. We're like, we must stop the scourge of the homosexuals.
Yeah,
Okay.
and before like the Sanderses don't say gay laws, um, there was a precursor in the House and in the Senate that attempted to define public morality through various
Yes.
instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And Bauman was one of 19 sponsors of that. Um, and you know what is just perplexing to me, Rick, is why is it that this was sort of a Republican Party, I think, isolated? I don't know any cases of Democrats who were gay, and there were a lot of them who went about the business of attacking gays. I
No, they really weren't. And I think this is one of those rules, Stuart. And I want to hear what you think about this because, we kind of flippantly say it's always projection with Republicans. It's always projection. So, when they say, oh, all of our opponents on the Democratic side are pedophiles. Well, you look at these story after story after story after story, as our buddy Reed Galen always posts, not a drag queen when you see these Republicans arrested for this stuff over and over and over again. And I do think it really speaks to something that is this has gone on to continues on today inside the GOP, because a lot of these guys, folks online who are the bold, manly men protecting the virtue of American women and all that other crap, and we're fighting the trans athletes, they're gay. That
so
projection is just, I mean, I see this arc that you've drawn here, and we could carry it all the way into this week right now in the Trump White House.
yes,
I
and
mean,
this is a world in which someone like Josh Hawley is writing a book on masculinity.
I know.
I
It's
mean,
like you look at Josh Hawley and you're like, that man has soft hands.
it, it's really, I think it speaks to this larger truth that we've had to come to grips with about the party, that a lot of what we espoused as bedrock principles were just marketing slogans.
Yeah.
People, people,
You said it best in your book title. It was all a lie. We were the party that believed we were going to stop communism and the Russian horde. And now, what are we doing? We're trying to force Ukraine to rebuild Putin's gas infrastructure that they've blown up in a war that Russia started. We were the party of fiscal responsibility, at least on paper, aspirationally, and now it's drunken sailors. And drunken sailors ain't in it in terms of the spending. So it just this seems to me like one of those data points that you and I and others have outlined for so long now. It's like the small tragedies and sadnesses and abuses in some of these cases of these guys who were closeted, etc. They really are speaking to a bigger problem inside the party we used to fight so hard for, and that is they don't believe in anything except power.
yes.
They will tell any lie. They will tell any lie. They will pretend of anything to hold power.
Yeah, and it's just is a sort of hollowness about the party as it turned out. Um, and there's a direct correlation between we were the party that was Mr. Gorbachev tear down the wall, but really now we're the party that's the pro-Putin party.
Right.
Like, how do you
Right.
square that? Nothing happened in between. We didn't have a
Well,
revisionist history to prove that Putin was actually,
no,
a
no.
benevolent leader.
I mean, we were the party of free markets, and right now
Right.
Donald Trump is doing a trade war. We're the party of free trade and free markets. Right now, Donald Trump is doing a trade war that's destroying the American economy. I don't know if anybody looked at their 401k today, but please don't. Not a great day. Um, and now he's telling automakers to protect him politically, don't raise your prices because of my trade war. We were not, as far as I knew, the party of wage and price controls, but apparently now we are. It just
Well, we were briefly for Nixon, but he had his own issues. So look, I encourage everybody to read this if you have time,
Yeah, it's a terrific
and
piece, guys. It really is very, very good.
and subscribe to Lincoln Square and subscribe to Rick Wilson's Substack. I mean, Rick is writing some fantastic stuff on this. Listen to the Lincoln Project podcast and Rick's Enemies List podcast.
We've got
Here,
we
on Lincoln
You know,
Square.
Stuart, I had such a nice note from somebody this afternoon. It was funny. We were all talking about Lincoln Square stuff earlier, just management call, the usual stuff you got to do. And I had such a nice note from somebody who emailed me. I was so frustrated asking people what to do. And I kept thinking about the propaganda, the disinformation. And it was like, I just want to thank you guys for what you're doing and speaking out so clearly. And I'm like, this is a start, folks. This isn't the end of this thing. We're trying to
Right.
build something here that will give you power. We're trying to build something that will give you out there a sense of confidence and to overcome the hopelessness and the disinformation, because that's the purpose of disinformation, is to make you feel like you're powerless. And we want you to feel powerful. We want you to
Yes.
feel empowered. We want you to feel like you've got the tools to go out and say to your crazy family members, the notorious Facebook uncle, now you're wrong. Here's what's real. Here's what's going on. Here's the real story. Here's what you should be thinking about. Here's how we see it. Because if you let Fox News eat your brain, it'll eat your brain. We
Yeah.
want to be the antidote to that.
All right, those are some profound thoughts to go into the weekend.
Yes.
Spend time this weekend reading Rick's latest. Sign up for Lincoln Square if you haven't. Subscribe if you can.
Yeah, it
And
is. It is. And folks, listen. I want to say this: two things to take heart from this weekend. Well, actually, three things to take heart from. Donald Trump is still, at this moment, struggling to get out of Signalgate. This is the longest since January 6th he has been behind the power curve on any message war. He has lost a step. Something is broken in his brain, and he can't spin his way out of this thing. Number two, the trade war stuff has really started to dig in. The Social Security cuts have started to dig in with average voters out there in the country. They're getting this now. They're understanding it at a level where Fox News can spin a lot of things and make them believe a lot of shit. But eventually, when grandma doesn't get a Social Security check, you can't spin that away. You can't pretend that doesn't exist. That stuff's really starting to hurt them. And the final thing is they are scared shitless about holding control of Congress. That's why Elise Stefanik got rug pulled and sent back to the minors. That's why in Florida, they are desperately afraid of what's going on down in Florida 6 and in Florida 1. And that's why they're desperately afraid. Elon is handing out $1 million checks in Wisconsin to try to buy a judgeship. This is a week where we've done good, folks.
Yep.
Y'all are kicking ass. Keep at it.
All right, keep at it. Thanks for joining. Talk to you soon. Bye.
See you, folks.